All right, welcome to a special edition of FAWKS News. I don't know if it's so special. It's just we've got, it's not even like really breaking news, but Fox News is dedicated to bringing news that's important to you in a timely fashion. But we always try to wait for the facts and we try to figure out the whole story. That's what independent journalism is all about. And that's what this news show is. It's our attempt at independent journalism to bring you a different perspective on today's news. But we try to get the whole story first. And this Coast Guard thing has popped up. It's been a lot on the social media webs. NBC ran with it. There's been several articles. And it really paints a picture that Donald Trump hates DEI and hates women. And that's why he couldn't stand having the first woman commandant, the first woman at the highest rank in a military service. Like the Coast Guard Commandant that we have here, but I don't know if that's the whole story. And so I've spent the last week or so since the eviction of the Coast Guard's first female Commandant took place. And as I've done more research, because this is a pretty significant case, I haven't read of another case where even in my time in the military, where a high-ranking official had to be evicted from their government-issued housing. Now, Commandant Fagan was housed in the Potomac, right outside of D.C. in Admiral housing. And then on January 20th at midnight, Donald Trump fired her. It was one of the first things that he did was fire the Commandant of the Coast Guard. At midnight 01, a mass email went out to everyone in the command staff of the Coast Guard that notified them of the new acting commandant and what was supposed to take place in the days following. And one of the big things were getting rid of anything that was LGBTQ plus DEI or other related documents, forms, posters, advertisements to be stripped away from all of the buildings. So that's kind of where this story starts. Today's show is brought to you by Piglet and a seriously funny true story. That's the book sitting on the shelf behind me. This is one of Simon Schuster's very first of its genre law enforcement comedy book that hits the shelves August 25th of this year. It is one of the #1 releases of the year. And I wrote the book. And it's really important to me, but I want to go further than that. This is the first law enforcement book. It's actually a very funny book. It's a life-changing book. I think it is exactly what law enforcement needed. If you guys have been following me long enough, you know that I'm with Failure to Stop podcast. I work with the Drinking Bros. They're the ones that created Failure to Stop. I don't know. Am I allowed, guys in the live chats, because we do have a live chat there, am I allowed to show off a Drinking Bros koozie if I have Topo Chico water in the koozie? I don't know if that counts or if that's blasphemous or not. Either way, but my whole life has been about speaking the language of law enforcement to civilians and then relating the civilians' rhetoric back towards law enforcement in a way that everybody can understand, since I'm no longer in law enforcement and I was born with the gift of gab. But I started writing this book many years ago when I was still a cop, and I did it to learn how to be a better writer, but I also did it as this kind of cathartic way of self-help or therapy. I was on night shift and my family would go to sleep at the normal time, but I would still be up on my days off because I was on night shift and I had to remain on night shift. And so what I did was I just began to write. It was something other to do than work out and watch porn all night. That's not healthy. Working out is. Watching porn is not. And I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole in life, as so many cops do. The alcoholism or the pornography or just whatever it is that they do to occupy their time, video games, anything like this. So typing was what I wanted to do. And I started typing out some of these police stories as they happen, but I like comedy. So I typed out the funnier stories. But as I began to write this book in the last 40 years, I would write chapters of I would vent, right? So I would have these moments where leadership would just absolutely fail, as we're going to talk about failed leadership in the Coast Guard today. and it would just grind my gears, and I would write about it. And so what ended up happening as I put it together was this very meaningful and powerful book that really spoke the language of law enforcement. And my wife eventually got a hold of it and began to read it. And then she really forced me to do something with it. And lo and behold, I had no idea that I would sign one of the larger book deals and that I would have a once in a lifetime, less than 1% as a first time author book deal with Simon Schuster. And I would get to work with somebody as fantastic as Nick Palmisano. But I want to really just show this. I really want to show Simon Schuster that law enforcement is worth it. They took a gamble on somebody who only has like 14,000 followers on Instagram, 13,000 on Facebook. I'm not a big, I don't have a lot of clout behind me. And so, and I'm not a well-known author or person. So for them to give me the book deal that I did, really just shows like the quality of the book. And the book's not going to sell because of who I am. The book is going to sell because of literally how powerful it is. You will laugh and you will cry. Right now I am only about 900 or so books behind. One of my favorite people of all time that I enjoyed watching as a kid, and that's Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen's book. I don't know why I'm comparing myself to Scottie Pippen, but if I could sell 900 more books, I will have beaten Scottie Pippen in pre-sales. And I want to have that as a bragging right. So if you've got time, if you got it in your hearts, head over to Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Nobles, wherever you want to buy your book, and grab Pig Latin, a seriously funny true story. Today's show is also brought to you by ghostbed.com/Wolfpack. Sleep so good it's scary. Listen, the Coast Guard Commandant here, she did not unpack her house, as we're going to talk about during the eviction process. And part of the reason is she didn't have a lot of ghost bed products in the house. If she did, she would have definitely not left those for some kind of private contract organization to go and get, because nobody would ever in their right mind leave their ghost bed behind. Head over to ghostbed.com right now and use that promo code Wolfpack. Also, I believe the promo code for Shieldbox is now Wolfpack. We officially have a promo code with Shieldbox, and Shieldbox is a monthly subscription for law enforcement, security, church security, to really revamp your gear. You're going to get new gear, sunglasses, knives. This is a breaching bowl, which I thought was just a really cool thing. It actually attaches to a baton if you wanted to. It seems like a war crime, but even cooler is that you can launch this through Windows. You can do a lot of crazy stuff with this, but it was just one of the cooler things that came in the box this month. But there's lots of stuff that comes in these boxes: shirts, hats, like I said, glasses, handcuffs, handcuff keys, handcuff pouches, radio pouches, ammo pouches, anything that you need to revamp your kit and just kind of have it a little bit better. It's a monthly subscription, $55 for the month, I believe. You can use the promo code Wolfpack and get you a little discount. Head over to Shieldbox, start your subscription today. All right. I'm going to be with you in just one moment, but give me 1 second, and we are going to dive right into the former Coast Guard Commandant. I'm sorry, being evicted. My children are right outside my studio skateboarding. I have to go yell at them. I apologize. Guys, I'm on the podcast. Stop. There you go. A little parenting of 5 homeschooled kids. They are outside skating on the ramp that they know they're not allowed to skate on when I'm podcasting. And I have a big giant sign that says live, so that they know. And they have a ramp in the backyard, ramp in the front yard, ramps out in the roads, and they chose to skate on the one right next to the studio. But hey, I love my kids, and that's just life. We're a real podcast, real family guy. And I'm human. What can I say? Let's get into this, guys. Former Coast Guard Commandant evicted. Why do I think this is important news for you? Because it kind of sets the tone for the Trump administration. This is one of the first things he did. One of the first notable things that he did in office. The first day one, before midnight, fires the first female commandant. Does he hate women, or is there more to this? Now, there was a big hearing, a Senate hearing for Commandant of the Coast Guard in June and July, and she did not do well. I've looked at her career and her past, and it doesn't look like she was ever a diversity hire. It looks like she earned a lot of the stuff she did. I have not a problem with her and her rising to the ranks of what she did. However, with great power comes great responsibility. What happened and what I didn't like out of this Senate hearing, I'm going to play some clips for you, but I did not like that she did not take ownership for what she did in the past. She says, well, I've only been the commandant for 13 months. All this stuff happened in 2014. Well, what rank was she in 2014? She was very much a part of the culture of the Coast Guard throughout the entire sexual assault, sexual harassment plague. This all started with a Facebook group. And as I have come to learn, this Facebook group was called something to the effect of Whistleblowing McGee. And it was all about the sexual harassment and sexual assaults that were taking place in the Coast Guard Academy and throughout leadership in the Coast Guard, and people who were relieved for trying to whistleblow on this, people who were punished, politically persecuted. And being in the military, I can see this happening. You see something that's happening. We had a real problem with steroids when I deployed. And one guy was having some real rage issues. He was having some real mental breakdowns. Matter of fact, he had struck an innocent Afghan in the face with the butt shock of his gun. It was completely inappropriate. And when one of the guys on my team, I was super young at the time, and so I wasn't going to get involved because I didn't really know what to do at 19 years old. But somebody else on our team tried to bring this forward, and he was removed from the team. He was sent somewhere else. And it was like he was punished for trying to whistleblow on this platoon leader, this platoon sergeant, this E7, who was just kind of out of control. They even raided his room and found the hypodermic needles in the E7. Nothing happened to him, but everybody else that was around him was kind of separated and almost punished, as in like, hey, if you guys are going to, tattletale, you're going to get the punishment. He's not going to get punished. You're going to get punishment. You should have just swept this under the rug. So I've actually seen this in real time, in real life. But everybody is aware of that Facebook group, and the gossip mill in the military in any branch is like wildfire. It's like the Hawaii wildfire, just spreads and spreads and spreads, or the Palisade wildfires, just spreads. So it's not, you can't use the excuse, I didn't know, I wasn't aware. By the way, you're the commandant. It means you're the highest ranking member. That's your job, is to know everything, and shit at that point rolls uphill. Of course, it's going to come back downhill eventually. But there's nowhere else for the shit to roll. It has to start with her. And so she's going to get the brunt of it. And then where it ends is also well. So I'm going to, this hearing, she did not do well. She pulled I've only been the commandant for 13 months. I don't think the Senate hearing, the Oversight Committee, I don't think they fell for it. Now, why is this important to you? You're like, come on, Eric, get to it. Why is this important to you? Because it sets the tone of what is going on. It's not about her being the first woman. It isn't her infatuation with DEI hires. Matter of fact, she does bring it up in the hearing that one of her solutions is that she had 40% more women and more persons of color in her academy classes, as if that is going to somehow help the sexual harassment and assaults that occurred by top leadership on lower ranking enlisted in the last 10 years. How is hiring more persons of color and more women going to help? By the way, do you know why the military doesn't invest in trying to recruit more women into its armed services? It's because 20% more women leave the military in their first term than the men do. It's simple economics. It costs more money to train a new recruit than it does to retain a recruit. And if women are going to get into the job and realize it's not for them and they're going to get out, then why are we investing more in recruiting and not investing in the reason why are the women leaving? Why are the women leaving in their first term? But we're not concerned about that. We're concerned with that recruitment number. And that's the problem with the DEI process. It's never been about equity. It's never been about long-term fixes to systemic problems. It has always been about virtue signaling in recruiting and painting stickers and pictures and holding more propaganda-filled PowerPoint classes than it's ever been about fixing the root causes. You have a real problem in the Coast Guard with sexual assaults from leadership down to the enlisted, and it was uncovered through a Facebook group that then CNN got a hold of and ran wild And that is what broke this whole thing free. And the Senate Oversight Committee and Congress are pissed that they had to find it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to play you a clip where she literally, one of the senators literally just comes right out and says it. Like, why is the media, why are we finding out that there's this massive problem with sexual assaults in higher leadership on lower enlisted in the Coast Guard, and none of us knew about it? There's no IG investigation going on. There's no chief's mess. Like, this has to be, this needed to be fixed, obviously, 15 years ago. But now it's just come to light. It just happened to come to light from CNN while this new commandant was in office. So it would have been whoever the commandant would have been, this would have been their responsibility. Now, my question was, how is she supposed to fix something that she didn't even know about? Because she's pretty she's pretty intent on letting everybody know in the Senate hearings that I've only been here for 13 months. And the minute I found out about this, I immediately started implementing policies and procedures and oversight committees within the Coast Guard to try to fix this. The minute I found out, well, the minute you found out was from CNN, but you knew about this because you were coming up through the ranks. You absolutely knew about this before you were the commandant, and you chose to keep it in-house. Not only did you choose to keep it in-house, but the victims of these crimes have never been given their benefits. They have never been given justice. And the command staff that was suspect of doing these things has continued to get promoted and then subsequently retire on their own free will, gaining all the benefits and never being held actually accountable for the crimes that they committed while in service. But instead, we fall back to, we've hired 40% more females and persons of colors in the last few academies. And our recruiting numbers have actually been met since the first time since 2017. Yeah, I mean, meeting recruiting needs by just putting people in position that aren't qualified to be there. I'm not sure that that's what we want in our military or in our pilots or in our astronauts or in our doctors and nurses or even our teachers. We want the most qualified people for the job. Yes, if law enforcement allows anybody with misdemeanors and felonies to now start becoming police officers, which that's what's occurring all over the United States, it's going to be easier. If we lower the standard for recruiting, it's easier to meet the recruiting needs. Again, it's because of this whole whatever generation. I don't want to call out a certain generation because all generations are guilty because they've raised the next generation. But we've had an entire generation of recruiters that feel like it's more important that they receive a cruise or they receive these benefits and these, which I've always thought recruiting has been highly corrupted. But if you lower the standards for these recruiters so that they can fulfill their needs and get their bonuses and get their cruises and get their vacations and all these incentives that come with recruiting, lowering the standard instead of rising to the level of trying to actually go out there and be a recruiter and do real recruiting things like they used to do, holding real recruiting events to find the right people. I was talking to one of the Coast Guard guys and they had a round table of how could they recruit, how can they meet recruiting requirements and find the standard. And one of the things was here is a list of law enforcement conventions and firefighter conventions and first responder conventions that happen around the United States. Here's Police Week. Here's a SHOT Show. Here's all the demographics that you want in quality people, the guys that are actually interested in this job. And you know what? They said, no, that's not what we're looking for. Really? That's not what you're looking for? Why is that not what you're looking for? Because what you're looking for is the color of somebody's skin and the gender of somebody, because that's easier to fill the recruitment. It's easier to check all the blocks, but checking the block doesn't get us to where we need to be as a nation, as a military force. Checking the block is what is killing this country. And I think that's what this new administration is trying to prove, that just checking the blocks is not going to get you where you need to be. More PowerPoints is not the answer. We don't fix the culture of sexual harassment in law enforcement by more PowerPoints. You know how we fix sexual harassment, sexual assault, or the culture of that plagues law enforcement and the military. I won't just pick on the Coast Guard. You know what would fix that is having real talks about infidelity, having real talks about holding people accountable for trying to fulfill their sexual desires versus focusing on their jobs. I have more of a problem in law enforcement and a problem in the military with my leadership having affairs, being caught up in affairs, leaving work to go have sex with other people, and getting caught up in investigation to get relief than I got real leadership from a lot of these guys. Because they were always on some kind of administrative leave, or they were on some kind of a secret squirrel investigation, and it all comes back down to some kind of infidelity. And they talk so much about morals and ethics, but they'll never tell you not to cheat on your wife or your significant other. They'll never tell you to not look at pornography in your cop car. They'll never tell you not to look at pornography while you're on night shift and you're at home all alone, sitting up bored out of your skull. They don't give you any of the real answers. But what they do is they give you PowerPoints on why you're racist or why you're homophobic. Which, by the way, 99.99% of everybody in those professions is in fact not racist and is in fact not homophobic at all. But when you watch the PowerPoint, and it's always funny because these PowerPoints and these ethics and these ego classes are always done by a minority. Doesn't seem very inclusive or very fair. And a lot of times these minorities are guilty, as most other people are, of the same infidelity and the same things that they're not even preaching about or against. Maybe they should find somebody who's a moral, outstanding officer or soldier and have them give the class and set the example instead of the person that is fucking around and is morally a slut or a whore, man whore, woman whore, whatever. Why do we have them up on the stage? It was funny as I've had an internal affairs worker who had been cheating and had slept with a married man in the department for years and years and years. And now she's sitting in IA trying to tell other people how they should conduct their lives and they should live their lives in a moral, upstanding way. It's really funny because one of the cases at the police department was somebody who got caught having sex on duty. And she was one of the internal affairs investigators at the time. I think that's laughable because she's been doing that for her whole career. Why does she get to be the high and mighty now? Let me play you some of the hearing here, and then I'll get out of here. I'll play this one first because I think this kind of just lets you know it was the hearing itself. It was bad on her part because she just played the I didn't know card. And you ask, well, what could she have done better before I play this? What she could have done better, and I talked to some guys in the Coast Guard, is that when she came in, if she would have made it top priority, she knew what was going on. If she would have turned it over on her own to IG or to the Congress, it wouldn't be on her head. But instead, she turned a blind eye to it. And that's what's gotten her hemmed up. Meanwhile, coupled with all of this is that morale in the Coast Guard, relatively low. I talked to one Coast Guard member who said he didn't really see a change, but I talked to another Coast Guard chief who has been a chief, is still a chief for over 20 years, and he says it was at an all-time low. But it's been like that since the whole DEI things because we're just getting beat to death. We have ships that need, they have infrastructure in the Coast Guard that is need of desperate repair, and the budgets are completely mismanaged. They mismanaged the whole drone thing because those were Coast Guard drones, by the way, flying over New Jersey. They didn't want to put that out, even though they knew the answer and it wasn't secret. They just still didn't think to come through and say, like, hey guys, those are actually our drones, and we're testing this thing with search and rescue with drones. And we've had these on the NOTAMs, the notice to airmen, but you guys don't know what a NOTAM is. And instead of calling you guys and we just let you run with this and look like idiots for a few months and create drone hysteria because of incompetence. Also, the mismanagement of the budget with things like base housing for enlisted soldiers. It's terrible. Hangars are falling apart. Aircraft repair is mismanaged. They built new gas lines and new pumps and pump housings on one of their piers, but they built that knowing that the pier was going to be torn down only months later. And then they tore down the pier, built a new pier, but never had a budget for a new pump house and new pipes because they had already budgeted that for the old pier, and because it was completely mismanaged. They knew that there was going to get a new pier. They knew that the new pier was coming, and instead they went through and ran the contract early because, again, of incompetence and mismanagement. That all comes apart on the Commandant at the time, which happened to be this Commandant. Tons of poor mismanagement, all at the same time, boasting and clouding about the DEI. And I think that is why Donald Trump fired her at midnight. They put out the memo at midnight 01, and also on the memo that the diversity and inclusion convention that the Coast Guard was holding that Monday was canceled. So everybody's plane tickets, hotel rooms, everything for the meeting was canceled, and all diversity, inclusion, and LGBTQ plus meetings were all canceled for the year. And they were actually told to go through and remove every poster. And I talked to another chief and the Coast Guard, and he said that, it was one of the greatest moments of his military life was getting rid of this stuff, because it wasn't about being a soldier, it wasn't about being a war, it wasn't about not being sexually assaulted, it wasn't about keeping maintenance and discipline. And, are you proficient in your armor? It was, what are you doing for gay people? What are you doing for trans people? Are we accepting of these people? And it's such a small percentage of the Coast Guard that they let all of the important stuff, the big picture stuff, fall by the wayside, only to focus on this very delusional trans LGBTQ plus movement that only represents less than 1% of that military branch. Let me go ahead and play this for you.
That have occurred here post the knowledge and information. Now, I understand that you and relatively new, how many months now on the job?
13 months.
13 months. And people are saying that a lot of this took place from 2014 to 2020, but there are also reports that there are things that have happened as recently as 2022. So I need to hear from you, what do you think are the necessary steps to really give everybody a full accounting of what's transpired, and your recommendations on how we are going to fix this, and what is the reasoning why Congress wasn't notified of the situation?
We failed the committee when we did not disclose in 2020. I'm the Commandant now, and I am committed to that not happening again. And I'm committing to moving forward in a manner that's consistent with the transparency that I strive for as Commandant and that you expect as the Oversight Committee. I've initiated a 90-day transparency and accountability review to understand what are the aspects of the culture that have allowed this to occur. It started as legacy sexual assaults that were mishandled at the Coast Guard Academy, but it is clear to me that we've got a culture in areas that is permissive and allows sexual assaults, harassment, bullying, retaliation, that's inconsistent with our core values.
Okay, this is the most important thing. This is the craziest thing. This is why I feel like she's being thrown under the bus at this point. Listen to this. Let me play it one more time. Just this one short little spot. This is really important.
Culture in areas that were mishandled at the Coast Guard Academy, but it is clear to me that we've got a culture in areas that is permissive and allows sexual assaults, harassment, bullying, retaliation.
We have a culture that is consistent with bullying, sexual assault. So you didn't just become the Commandant, you have moved up through the ranks for the last 40 years. You knew there was a culture, and you're like, the only way you can fix that culture is at the Commandant level. And you're also saying that it's just now aware to you at the Commandant level. So it wasn't aware to you when you were an admiral, wasn't when you were a young lieutenant, when you were a captain, when you were moving up through the ranks. It was never apparent at any of those times that you had a culture of sexual assault. As a woman in the Coast Guard, you didn't know that there was an entire culture that you're just now admitting to a Senate committee that there is it blows my mind. She did know. She absolutely knew. And she chose, even when she became the Commandant, that's the problem. And I write about this in my book in a very funny way, but that is what happens. It's when I get to the top, I'm going to fix things. But for right now, I have to play the game. Oh, and then they get to the next rank. Oh, I just got to play the game until I get to the next level. And then I got to play the game. And then by the time you get to the highest level, you are the game. You've been playing the game, quote unquote, for so long that you are now the game. She should have if she knew this from the start, from coming through the ranks, the minute she got there, and she is a woman. This should have been priority for her. She should have wiped clean the chief's mess. She should have wiped clean all of the investigators. She should have wiped clean the academy staff, and she should have set a precedent that this is the most important thing. We cannot have this culture of sexual, just sexual disgustingness that is plaguing not only the Coast Guard. Oh, by the way, the Army is not immune to this at all. And they've been sweeping shit like this under the rug for a very long time. It's like military worldwide. It just CNN caught it, and it looks super embarrassing, especially since Coast Guard falls under Homeland Security, and they have so many their scope is mainly stateside. It just irritates everyone that was around this, Congress, Senate. She is Homeland Security, first female commandant, and the media is the one that had discovered this, and it really pisses them off. I want to play the rebuttal to this. You heard what she just said.
It's very frustrating to hear that you think there is a culture of assault at the Coast Guard. And this is not going to be tolerated. It's not going to be tolerated by us. It's not going to be tolerated by the American people. And we are going to hold people accountable. And one of the reasons we were excited about your nomination is because we thought it was going to usher in a new era. And I want to understand what you think the principles are for changing that culture now. But we are going to hold people accountable.
So we do not have a culture of assault in the Coast Guard.
I think the exact words were legacy of cultural, well, we'll get the actual record.
There was a legacy of.
Right. So she's even calling it out, like saying, you just admitted that there is a culture, and like, you're not going to, and you don't have a plan for that. That wasn't like your first 13-month plan as the commandant. No, because it was DEI, inclusion, and LGBTQ plus that was the most important. And again, not to mention all the other budget issues that I've already brought up. That's the problem with this DEI stuff. It's not that it's the DEI in general. Of course, we want equality across the board. Of course, we would like to have more females, but you got to get rid of these root problems, these way bigger issues before you can start worrying about all this DEI stuff. Let me go back to this clip here.
Maddening, frustrating, and intolerable where we are today with this sexual abuse and assault within the Coast Guard. Cannot tolerate the fact that the Coast Guard did not notify us of this. We cannot have the media be the policeman on the beat. And I'm going to ask for an IG inspection so that we can get to the bottom of all the problems that have occurred here post the.
So that's what I was talking about when I said that they're embarrassed by this. I mean, here's your facts that she's embarrassed by. She said we cannot have the media being the world's police on this. Like, it shouldn't be the media's responsibility to bring this to Congress. That's why independent journalism is so important. That's why things like social media and freedom of speech are so important. This would not even be on the radar if it wasn't for social media. Isn't that crazy? That's why they want to silence things like TikTok, and they want to silence things like Instagram. They want to silence things like podcasts, because that is the one that is uncovering the culture and the epidemic of just the low moral values that our leadership across the board hold, and all these things. Like, we do not hold people accountable for their moral infidelities, their moral. It's almost like the more immoral you are, the cooler you are, and the faster you get promoted. And instead, it should be a punishable. When you have moral issues at home, when you get caught watching porn on your work computer, you should be fucking punished, not sent just to therapy, but you should be loss of rank. It should set an example for others to follow. You should be afraid to have your moral issues flow into your workspace. When you can't keep your moral issues at home and work on them at home or with your significant others, or when you're bringing it to work and you're doing it to your lower enlisted, or when you're doing it at work, during work, or it's affecting your work, Like it should be an example to others. Your punishment should be an example to others of keeping that. That's what, we need to go back to what I say, shaming people for their moral ineptness, if that's a word, being inept when it comes to morality. Let me play one last screen recording here.
One of the most damning parts of her letter to be that those survivors evidently were denied that opportunity. What are you going to do to give those veterans the opportunity to access care and benefits?
I am committed to cooperating with the IG. We'll continue to work to understand what did or did not happen.
Is the IG saying you can't give them the opportunity to sign CG?
It is an ongoing
6095?
investigation, and the IG has said this is while it is under investigation, I cannot initiate action. As soon as we are able to, I will ensure that any victim who's entitled to veterans benefits has access to those benefits. This allegation just came forward yesterday, and we were working with the IG to understand what happened, what didn't happen, and then we'll.
But if it was a trans person that had a trans issue, they would be giving them benefits immediately. If this was a DEI thing, they would be getting funds out immediately. But that's why I said we don't care about the women. It doesn't really, we only care about the DEI on its face. It's virtue signaling. We only care about that recruitment number. We just care about the semantics of DEI. You don't really care about its totality. Because if you really cared about women, if you really cared about victims, you would have been making sure that while this investigation is going, that they are getting compensated for all the things that they haven't been compensated for the past, I don't know, however many years, 10 years, 15 years, since they were relieved or since they were booted out of the Coast Guard for being whistleblowers or for being simply victims of culture leadership that can't seem to keep their hands off of lower enlisted.
Work to support victims. My priority is supporting victims.
No, your priority is not, or else they would have already been paid. You're the Commandant. You're the Admiral. You're the highest in charge of anybody in the Coast Guard. You won't mean to tell me that you couldn't pull strings to get these women in some kind of program, that you couldn't go to the media yourself and put this you couldn't make this a bigger deal on the Congress floor. They're like, hey, we have a problem with sexual harassment. It's been swept under the rug. And mainly it's men, and these women have suffered for it. This is why we don't have women in the Coast Guard. This is why retention for women in the Coast Guard is at an all-time low, and why 20% of more women get out in their first term. This is why we need to be giving these women their benefits that they deserve while this investigation is happening with the higher enlisted men that sexually assaulted or sexually abused these women.
Will the IG investigation be done?
You'll have to ask the IG, sir. I do not know. I don't know. I'm cooperating with the IG.
But in the meantime, survivors are denied medical care without any justification.
But if they were trans, they would be getting their medical care. We all know that. That's the problem with this whole movement.
And I find that absolutely untenable and intolerable. And I think it will impact morale within the Coast Guard. Wouldn't you agree?
I continue to work with the IG, and I'm committed to providing support for victims, and will continue to work that issue forward. I don't want any victim to not get the support that they are entitled to.
The IG investigation, I submit respectfully, cannot be used as a shield for inaction. It cannot be used as an excuse for failing to address these ongoing problems. It cannot be used as a reason to refuse disclosure of documents to this subcommittee. And the IG has not asked you to refuse medical care or deny access or refuse documents to this committee, so far as I'm aware. I'm going to turn to...
Yeah, so you can see this is why she was fired day one. It's the plague of problems. It's the totality of the problems in the Coast Guard. There has to be change. Is she a scapegoat? Yeah, sure. She's got to fall on the sword. That's her job. Shit starts at the top. Sucks that she's the first woman commandant of all time, but we got to paint a serious picture. And this is the example that Donald Trump is saying. He said, this is what you should have done when you became the commandant. You should have cleaned freaking house and made a statement that this will not be done. That's how you change a culture. Unfortunately, that's how you do it. You make an example out of somebody who is guilty. You make an example of them and you say, this will not be tolerated. I do that in my own house, raising my children. There are things that I set from a very early age. This will not be tolerated and you will get spanked for it. Not a lot of things that you can do in my house to get a spanking. Direct disobedience, as in don't touch that stove. If you touch that stove, you'll get a spanking. And they touch the stove, obviously you get a spanking. Direct disrespect. Shut up, mom. Shut up, dad. No, not indirect. That's not going to get you a spanking. It might get you yelled at. Like indirect kind of disrespectfulness. Like, oh, all right, mom, fine. You know, that's going to get hey, don't huff and puff at your mom. Don't roll your eyes at your mom. But direct disrespect get you a spanking. And they know that. I'm very clear on that. And then if a safety issue occurs that I warrant a spanking is needed to prevent safety issues, as in like you went down the road, you went down the driveway on your skateboard, you did not look both ways before you went out in the street. Thank God a car didn't come up here. I'm going to spank you right now so that you never, ever forget that when you, and hey, a spanking is memorable. Not to go down that rabbit hole, but sometimes I flick them on the cheek because I've already seen it in their eyes. They're crying. Like they've already pretty much get it. You just need like a small little flick, just a little reminder that they'll never, ever, ever forget it. That's been going on. I mean, it's worked brilliantly. And if you do it right one time, you never have to worry about it again. What's more important, hurting their feelings with a little flick on the face or having them forget it, run out into the road and get killed by a car? That is what a good parent is. That is what good leadership is making sure, one, you're fair, but that your men actually and your women know what is tolerated and what's not. And I have a culture inside of my house of courtesy. If you've ever met my kids, everyone will say he has the most courteous children of all time. They're so respectful to adults. They're a wild bunch. You can follow them. Tansy fam. Go look at my children. I implore you. Listen, they're an example. They are great. They're an amazing kids. Incredible kids. They do incredible things. Skateboarding, bull riding, all sorts of crazy shit. But you will always hear them saying, yes, sir, no, sir. Hey, thank you, sir. Thank you. We run a tight ship. A very fun ship, but a very tight ship. They understand the culture. We have a culture of love and caring and acceptance in our house. And that leads to healthy behaviors, not sexual immorality. It doesn't lead to, any crazy arguments and outbreaks, because I rule things with a very fair, loving, and kind hand. And I'm concerned about the culture because I'm the leader of my house. That's why I always hug and kiss my wife in front of my kids when I have the opportunity. It's why I always compliment my wife all the time in front of my kids. I compliment my daughters constantly and my boys constantly. So there is a culture of love and in peace, and they feel empowered and they feel confident. And we don't have to worry about all these mental illness issues when you have a good culture. When you don't have a good culture, when you're not fair to your kid, or you just simply don't care, the wheels start to fall off, not only in your house. Now think about that on the scale of a military service. Once they don't understand the culture, when you have a culture of, that guy didn't get punished for cheating on his wife. Matter of fact, he got promoted. So now that I'm talking to this little private here and I'm a sergeant, I mean, shit, dude, the colonel fucking was banging a sergeant and he didn't get any trouble. He got promoted. I mean, it's not a big deal. People don't really care in the military. I'm not going to try not to get caught. That's what it sets the culture up for. If I allow my kids to say shut up to their mother one time, I don't make an example of them, and instead I say, listen, go play in your room. And then my other kid's like, well, he got to tell mom to shut up. He went to his room for like 5 minutes. It seems pretty fucking worth it. So now I'm going to say shut up. And then he says, shut up. And then my next kid, now I got 5 kids telling their mom to shut up. Like, what the culture of my house is falling apart. You have to make an example. The minute you hear shut up, mom, yeah, everybody in that household is going to know dad's pissed. We don't ever say shut up to mom, ever. I don't have to worry about that because my kids are actually extremely respectful to their mother because they understand, they know the severity, the consequence of being directly disrespectful to their mother. And they make me proud all the time because there's some things like I think I would like cock back at, where it's like mom, like I tell one kid that they can watch something on TV or they can do something and mom comes in and says, hey, I didn't say you could watch that. You know, they don't say, well, dad said I could. What they do is say, yes, ma'am, turn it off. And then they'll wait. And I'll hear mother be like, mom, dad actually said we could watch that. But like, we turned it off and I'm going to find something. I just want to let you know I didn't just turn it on. And then I go, yeah, honey, I did. I actually did tell them that. And my wife already knew that. But it makes me proud that they wait and that they critically think their way through this. And they say, now's not the right time. But it goes back to culture and leadership. That's why this is important. Donald Trump is setting an example. He's spanking that child in front of everybody, this commandant, and saying, we want to change the culture in our Coast Guard, in our armed services. You better get on board. You better get on board. If you've got some shit that you're putting away, Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, that shit better start coming to light before the media gets hold of it, because I ain't going to tolerate it. And now, what do you think all those commanders and generals are doing right now? Hey, guys, what are the sexual assault and harassment? I guarantee you everybody that saw her get fired and then get evicted from her home. By the way, that's the crazy part of this story. She was fired. They gave her 3 months. This is hilarious. They gave her 3 months. Or no, I'm sorry. They gave her 60 days to get out of her house. After about 3 weeks, the FBI shows up at her door and they say, no, you got 3 hours to get out. And she left all of her belongings behind. The Coast Guard had to hire a private contracting company to come in there because she refused to clean up her shit. And they had to pack her shit for her. She's relieved of her command. She's done. There's nowhere else. Once you go to the commandant, she has no choice but to retire now. Is she going to get an honorable discharge? Other than honorable discharge, I have no idea. Probably not going to go that far. But firing her and disgracing her like they did on the Congress floor is probably enough. And I think the example has been set that they fired her, and that it doesn't matter if you're the first woman or not. Nobody is above the law here. Everybody is better get on board, or you're going to be made an example of. You're going to be fired, terminated immediately. Also, the fact that she made them come and clean out her stuff, it shows the babiness and the crybaby and the unprofessionalism. What picture does that paint? Oh, I don't like it. I got fired. I'm not going to clean out myself. No, you still have your nobility. You still have your last name. You could still leave with your held out. When I had to turn in all my gear after I was wrongfully terminated from the Raleigh Police Department for opening up a legal business in another county and doing everything by the book, just because the city manager didn't like that it happened to be a distillery, and they fired me for unbecoming of an officer. Even though it was such bullshit and I was treated so terribly, from being officer of the year to fired the same year and just treated like public enemy number one, I still folded every bit of my equipment, polished and cleaned every piece of my equipment, and turned it in. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And I'm not going to be a little baby. I'm not going to do what they do and act like a little pussy. I'm going to leave with my head held high. And that everybody that I served with can say, wow, did I ever speak an ill word of Raleigh PD? When I wrote my book, matter of fact, some of the RPD guys that have pre-read my book, they're like, dude, I can't believe you didn't come down on the department for firing you. Like, I thought you were going to really take some stabs. I didn't take any stabs because I'm better than that. But she's obviously not. She's obviously not better than that. Well, guys, like G.I. Joe says, maybe you didn't know about the former Coast Guard Commandant being evicted, which is absolutely hilarious, but also being fired, and why it's important. But now you do know, and knowing is half the battle. And again, it's very important news article to know, because that is leadership 101. And that is how you should be leading your household as well, to make sure that the culture of your house, the culture of your family, the culture of wherever you're managing, when you become a manager, that's how culture is developed, that you have clear and concise things that you tolerate and don't tolerate, and then you fix them. And if one of the biggest issues in your department or wherever you're at is sexual infidelity, sexual immorality, is sexual assault and harassment, then you make that priority numero uno, and you start to clean house, and you make an example for everybody that this will not be tolerated. So when you're at, I challenge you right now, going forward in your own, where you're the leader, be it your house, be it your church, be it whatever it is that you're a leader at, ask yourself, what is the biggest problem that we have right now? What is directly affecting the people around me right now? And how can I change that culture? Unless it's good, unless you have a great culture. If your morale is high, don't change things just for the sake of changing things so you can be a leader. Sometimes being a leader is just saying like, hey, status quo, we're doing good right now. Let's keep up the morale. Let's keep this going. But if there is something going on that you know is an issue, And like for me, I always knew that one of the bigger problems was sexual infidelity, immorality going on in our police department. And everybody kind of knows that, but they don't talk about it. They sweep it under the rug. And that's not how you fix that problem, that issue. How can you feel safe at work as a female if you've got a whole bunch of thirsty supervisors drooling over you? How can you feel safe at work if the guys and the girls, or if the guys are constantly trying to elicit sexual behaviors out of you at the meetings, at parties, at after hours events? If your squad is trying to get you to show your titties, if they're trying to coerce you into sex, if you're having sex with more than one partner in your place of work, that is a cultural issue. That's a cultural problem. Because we're not focused on work, we're focused on something else. And that's not what work is for. You can change that culture. You have an obligation and you have a duty to change that in leadership. And that's why I felt like this was a bigger story that needs to be told than what has been led on by the press. We got a big show tomorrow, lots of stuff. We've got airplanes falling out of the sky upside down, ? We've got lots of Doge things that have come to light. We've got hockey game that's changing the world. We've got NASCAR. We've got the president. Is he spending money? Is he saving money? Plus, what's going on overseas? Why have we heard nothing about Ukraine? Why have we heard nothing about Iran? What's the updates of Gaza? We got so much to cover. It's almost harder to do this job now because I don't know what to pick and choose from. I don't know which news is the main headlines because I feel like everything is a main headline these days. It really is. There's so much going on in the country. There's so much stuff to report on. It's almost as if like 2 or 3 shows a week aren't even enough because I wanted to keep this show today in 25 minutes. I ended up spouting on for 50, but tomorrow we're going to hit thing after thing after thing. So we got a lot to cover tomorrow. It's going to be a really fun show. A couple of special guests. Also working on a project right now on the failure to stop side of things where we're diving even deeper into the Holtzclaw case. I've got a detective who wrote the book that we had on a few Fridays ago, Cameron Santana. And he is now going in. We're working with the Holtzclaw family and some of the attorneys we're reaching out to try to bring more to light the Holtzclaw case in hopes that maybe the Trump administration will see the absolutely wrongful conviction of Daniel Holtzclaw, and one of the most absurd cases where he didn't just lose because he lost a court. There is evidence that proves that he is innocent. This is an innocent man that's doing 200 years behind bar, and he is completely innocent in every way. There is not one shred of evidence that leads to this man being what he was painted out to be. In fact, there's a Mount Vesuvius amount of evidence that shows he is exactly the opposite. He was a white man at the time of Michael Brown and George Floyd. At the Michael Brown time frame, this was a mob riot that literally changed the course of the jury. They even admitted to it, that they were afraid for lives. They had Black Panthers in uniforms in the courthouse. The threats, this whole thing was political persecution of a white cop that they wanted to make an example of the wrong person who was completely innocent. That's the Daniel Holtzclaw case. And I'm actually working on a project through Failure to Stop, being funded by Failure to Stop, to show more evidence and to bring the Daniel Holtzclaw case to light. So be joining us for Failure to Stop as we work through all of this. It's a pretty fun project. Hearts and prayers go out to everybody in Kentucky, everybody that's had the tornadoes, the flooding. Michigan's under a flood right now. North Carolina's about to get hit with a massive amount of frost. We've got a bunch of earthquakes rocking. A lot of things are just going pretty haywire. So stay up to date on your weather news. I use Ryan Hall as an independent weather source. I really like Ryan Hall, so maybe you guys will like him too. For society and culture news, make sure you're checking out One More and I'm Out of Here podcast. One More and I'm Out of Here for sports and for other political commentator. And then we have The Bar is Open with Beth and Greg on our network that does society and culture and all the fun-loving news. So make sure you're giving all of them some love. If you're still hanging around, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment. But more importantly, leave us a 5-star rating and review. If you haven't pre-purchased Piglet and a Seriously Funny True Story, I urge you to go and do that too. Be a part of this. The email list will be going out either tonight or tomorrow. Everybody that sent me their email address, the hundreds of you that sent me the email address, you guys are all going to get something very special in the mail with your order of the book. But that's only for those who are part of it, of the email list. That email list is only going to be up for so long. So if you want to be on the email list, you have to hit me on Messenger or IG Messenger, Facebook, DM me. And all you have to do is DM me your email address. There's no message that has to go with it. It's actually easier if you just send me your email address. That way I can just copy the email address and put it right into the email blockchain. And I'm going to send out the mass email. It's only going to have to do with the book. You're not going to get spammed. You're not going to get, it's just a one-time deal. I treat you guys like your family to me. If you're on my email list, the old email list, yes, it's the old one, Will Cray. If you need it to be updated, send it in. Hydroman Blue says Ryan Hall, y'all. That's exactly right. But I'm gonna send out this email. It's gonna be a personal email written by me, not my agent, not anybody else. And the gift that I am sending out after the email is 100% out of my pocket. And I haven't been paid from book sales yet because the book doesn't come out till August. So this is 100% being paid forward out of my own pocket. As I thank you for being patient. It's kind of like Chick-fil-A. Like, you're like, damn, dude, you didn't have to give me a free chicken biscuit for waiting an extra 5 minutes for my chicken, but fucking thank you. I want to be that guy. I want to be the Chick-fil-A of authors, the Chick-fil-A of podcasting hosts. So I want to thank you guys for being on that list, and I want to send you guys something all special individually. And so that's my goal, at least. That's what I'm going to try to do, and I'll be working on that in the next night or two. So until next time, guys, guns up, giddy up. We'll see you tomorrow, 10 o'clock for big giant political news-a-palooza.